Can you imagine living on £2 a day? Feeding your entire family, sending your children to school, finding clean water, buying clothes, accessing medical care, all with just £2? It's impossible. Yet it's also the reality for 700 million of the 8 billion people living in our world today. £2 means a choice. Do you send your child to school, or do you give them dinner that won't even fill their stomach? When you think like this, it's easy to assume that poverty is simply not having enough money to buy the basic necessities to live. And while that's certainly true, poverty is a lot more complex than just that. It's not just a lack of income. It's a state of deprivation. It's constant exclusion from resources and opportunities we all take for granted, from education to healthcare, to even something as simple as a bank account. Poverty is a vicious cycle. A child born in poverty grows up without access to education, limiting their future to the lowest paying jobs, if any at all. They, in turn, raise their families in the same desperate conditions, and the cycle continues, generation after generation. It's a heartbreaking trap that leaves millions without an escape. It's true that we have countless big-name charities that are helping combat poverty, like Oxfam and UNICEF, and we have initiatives like council housing and job creation programs. But I've done some research, and this is the solution that convinced me the most, yet it's also one not many have heard of, and that is microcredit. So, what is microcredit? Well, microcredit schemes provide very small loans, often only around £100, to groups of people living in poverty, and the idea is that these loans are used to generate income through self-employment. For example, many women use the money to rent a stall in a local village market to sell their handmade items, or they use it to buy materials to make things like bags or rugs. In this way, microcredit gives people the power to earn a steady income, and it gives them the opportunity to break themselves out of the cruel poverty trap. So many people living in poverty are excluded from the financial world and cannot even open a bank account, meaning they can't take out a loan. Microcredit, however, bypasses things like credit scores or how stable a person's income is. In fact, it actually aims to reach the least creditworthy people who have no collateral and would never be accepted by the traditional banking system. So, where did microcredit begin? How was it developed? Well, microcredit was developed by a man in Bangladesh called Muhammad Yunus. Bangladesh, combined with India, is home to 1/4 of all people living in poverty in the world, and in 1974, it was hit by a huge famine that severely exacerbated living conditions. Flying in from the US to a small village called Jobra, Muhammad Yunus came across a woman called Sophia. Sophia was a bamboo stool maker, but she was being forced to borrow money from local moneylenders because she didn't have enough to buy the bamboo to make her stools. The catch is that these moneylenders were hugely corrupt and had such high interest rates on their loans that Sophia was never actually able to repay her debt and begin to make a profit for herself, despite doing so much hard work. It was a tragic story, but unfortunately, it was the reality for so many other women in the village as well. Therefore, Yunus decided to step in, and he gave $27 of his own money to a group of 42 women so that they didn't have to rely on these corrupt moneylenders. And although that's less than $1 per woman, miraculously, these women were able to not just repay their debt, but also begin to earn a profit for themselves on top of that. It seems unbelievable that such a small loan had such a huge impact, but it's precisely because the loan was so small that these women were able to easily repay their debt and begin to earn money for themselves. What they did was essentially start their own small businesses to earn a steady income, meaning suddenly they had money for food and education for their children, helping break the generational cycle of poverty. So, microcredit seems like a genius idea, and certainly it has had many successes. In terms of repayment rates, which is what always stopped traditional banks from giving loans to people in poverty because they were scared the debt would never be repaid. In 2016, the biggest microcredit bank, called Grameen Bank, had a repayment rate of 98.96%. That's significantly higher than the repayment rate of many traditional banks. Growing beyond Bangladesh, microcredit is used extensively in India, and at the beginning of the 21st century, it finally reached the international stage. 2005 was designated as the International Year of Microcredit by the UN, and in 2006, Muhammad Yunus was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his incredible work in finding an economic tool that effectively reduces poverty. So, what went wrong? Because if microcredit was so successful, why do we never hear about it today? And the answer to that is, unfortunately, corruption. The idea of microcredit was that it was a non-profit industry, and so the focus was always on poverty alleviation. This meant interest rates on loans were low, and it was easy for debts to be repaid. However, when the industry boomed, everyone could see just how lucrative it was, and it was taken over by corrupt individuals who were greedy for profit. Within just a few years, 20 years of hard work to establish microcredit as a solution to world poverty was undone. The industry was commercialized, and suddenly the poor recipients of microloans found themselves deep in debt as interest rates soared. Microcredit, which had seemed so promising, was hijacked by greedy, opportunistic individuals, and suddenly it was exploiting people in poverty instead of supporting them. But with all that said, I still believe the future of microcredit remains bright. I'm optimistic because we are putting in measures to limit corruption, and we are employing microcredit schemes again with the correct goal of helping people in poverty instead of making profit for ourselves. With newer regulations, including caps on interest rates and limits on loan amounts, greater transparency and more ethical practices emerging, we are effectively combating the corruption and ensuring that microcredit remains a powerful tool for poverty alleviation today. The Microcredit Summit campaign has said that over 140 million people have benefited as a result of microloans, and recent reports from the World Bank have referenced microfinance services as a key factor leading to an increase in household income for women in rural areas. Microcredit, with its potential to, as we regain control of such an important industry, microcredit, with its potential to uplift millions from poverty and break the cruel cycle of deprivation, looks more and more promising by the day. Now it's up to us to make sure that microcredit remains a tool for empowerment rather than exploitation. Thank you and have a good evening.